LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 10th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. As you can see, I unexpectedly have a chance this week to wear one of those t-shirts I sent out to a bunch of my viewers back in November and December of 2019, the Impeach Trump t-shirt. And I'll be talking about the insurrection, the possibility of impeachment, and a lot more using the 14 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all tonight. There's a link down in the video description to the source of my 12 clips. Topics are impeach Trump again, and also I'll have a clip at the end on vaccine distribution and possible virus mutation problems. CBS was the only one to cover that, and that'll be the final clip. Clip 12 if you're following along on the clip list. But the political comedy, it was a pretty dark week. We saw an insurrection against our democratic form of government at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And so for political comedy, it brings me back to some of the dark comedy I remember from when I was a criminal defense attorney. Some of the dumb defenses to certain crimes we'd hear over and over again. I remember in a lot of DUIs, the person would pull over and shift over to the passenger seat and claim somebody else was driving. We actually called this person Imaginary Mike. I was reminded of the drug possession, especially this next clip of the drug possession charges, where we would hear this excuse over and over again. Those were not my pants defense. And that is kind of the defense you're going to hear applied to zip ties in this clip from the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, a new show on MSNBC I like to watch, where AM Joy used to be. And here's Jonathan Capehart talking to Yale professor Phillip Atiba Goff this morning over here.
So we're now showing pictures, we were just showing pictures next to you of the person who was carrying zip ties. Right there, zip ties. For what purpose would someone be carrying zip ties, especially dressed like that?
Okay, so first we have to address the fact that he has allegedly gone on the record to say he just found them and picked them up. So we got to address the fact that there are these narratives of false innocence about, I found the feces and I didn't know where to put them, so I put them on the wall. I just happened to run into the speaker's office. We got to call that out as complete and utter, just impossible BS. But those zip ties are the kinds of things that you use when you want to take a large number of people and essentially detain them. That's what you use for kidnappings. It's also what you use for mass arrests. If you want to move people from one place to another place and you don't have access to metal handcuffs, those are an attempt to take folks in the Capitol hostage. I know that when we were first seeing this, in part for sort of good reasons, you don't want to show that level of violence without knowing what the heck is happening. We didn't see how dangerous this was. We didn't see armed folks. We didn't see the footage of someone being shot. But this was an incredibly dangerous moment for our democracy and for everybody in the Capitol. Folks had plans and military training that they could have pulled off far worse, far more violent, and dragged people out of that Capitol. There was, my understanding, a functional gallows constructed in front of the Capitol. So if you wanted to lynch somebody on the steps of the Capitol, you would bring those kind of zip ties to get them from their office to the hanging noose. That's what you use it for.
And as we know, there's been video.
And actually, what Jonathan Capehart goes in to talk about the chance of hang Mike Pence. And I don't know how many of you saw that coverage of the working gallows that was erected outside the Capitol Square or whatever it's called, that And that's, I started this off as political comedy, and I called it dark comedy, but it got really dark there. And you're going to see that in some of the other clips. It could have been so much worse. I've seen a lot of reports that we came very close to having, there 5 people died already. I heard a 6th officer died outside the line of duty. I heard he committed suicide, actually, in one report. The 2nd officer who died today. But you can let me know if you have any verification of that down in the comment section. But it could have been so much worse. There could have been members of Congress killed in addition to the 5 or now possibly 6 people who are dead. It was definitely an insurrection. I'm going to talk about insurrection a little bit when I talk about this possible alternative to impeachment using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. If you have your U.S. Constitution handy, that's also something else I send out to people. Look at Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It also gives a way that you could stop people who engaged in insurrection from holding high office. And I'm even going to show a clip of Laurence Tribe talking about that. If you're following along on the clip list, that is clip number 9. And Laurence Tribe, you may remember last week I held up this big book, American Constitutional Law. Well, that's actually written by Laurence Tribe. So I will be committing some legal analysis throughout the show, but I wanted to start off doing something a little different before I show the news clips. I want to commit a little of that legal analysis about what incitement is, because you're going to hear a lot of descriptions of what Trump did in his rally last Wednesday as incitement. So I actually want to show you it's actually a pretty strict standard under the First Amendment as to what someone has to do before they can be criminally charged with inciting someone to commit a lawless act. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply to impeachment. Impeachment isn't a criminal conviction. But if you actually wanted to charge Trump after he leaves office with inciting an insurrection or inciting lawless action, here is the Brandenburg Standard. I've actually put a link down in the video description to this entire Brandenburg versus Ohio case from 1969, which was actually about a speech at a KKK rally. So it's not some sort of soft comparison. And you can see, oh wait, sorry, my first mistake. That is something I'm going to show you later. That's the federal law against rebellion or insurrection. I'm going to show you that when I show you the Laurence Tribe clip. But no, here's the Brandenburg Standard, sorry. And so, like I said, this was about a KKK rally. And what someone said there, bad things about blacks and Jews, but nothing like specific about going and getting them. And here's the standard. The constitutional guarantees of free speech and free press do not permit a state to forbid or prescribe advocacy of the use of force or of a law violation, except when such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. So you basically have to intend and say, do the crime, and right now, and it has to be likely to cause the person to do it. Like, if it seems like a joke, if you're not serious, if you're like all, sitting around the diner and, we should rob a bank, that's not it. And that's the thing, if you watch Trump's speech, there were a lot of despicable things in there, and I think it's worthy of impeachment, which I'll talk about later. But in terms of a criminal charge, I listened carefully. I was surprised when he told them to march to the Capitol. That seemed a little over the line, but in terms of that standard, he never told them to break into the Capitol. He told them to, cheer for some people and not so much for other people. He actually told them to be peaceful at one point. It's pretty difficult under this Brandenburg versus Ohio standard for me to see how Trump was directing where his advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and likely to incite or produce such action, when he never told anyone to commit a crime. But I tend to be more of a free speech purist. There are some people, and the reason is not because I'm a big Trump fan, but because I've been to a lot of rallies. I've been to Black Lives Matter rallies where they say, let's, march down to City Hall and fight for our rights, or not exactly, but I'm paraphrasing, but that's no more than what Trump did at his rally. Let's fight, let's march down to the Capitol and, demand they stop the steal. That's not breaking any windows. That's not doing all the actual insurrection and lawlessness that actually occurred. Trump never said that. And that doesn't mean what he did wasn't morally despicable for the President of the United States. I'm just wondering whether he has a First Amendment defense to being charged with a crime. That's the point I'm bringing up there. And having committed that legal analysis beforehand, I'm now going to show you all the news summaries, and they all cover this. I think they all mention the word incitement, and that's why I wanted to do that before showing the news clips. I'm going to start with the longest one, NBC News' Meet the Press. Maybe I'll criticize it after I show it because I feel like I've been talking too long. You can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
Good Sunday morning. It was almost exactly 4 years ago at his inauguration that Donald Trump stood at the U.S. Capitol and said, "This American carnage stops right here and stops right now." On Wednesday, that American carnage came to the Capitol, inspired by a president trying to deny his successor's inauguration. Make no mistake, what happened that day was an insurrection against the United States government by thousands of pro-Trump rioters who stormed and sacked the Capitol, aided by elected Republicans trying to overturn Joe Biden's victory with a big lie, and inspired by a president of the United States who urged that mob on. Then later that day excused the violence with a lie, again calling the election fraudulent. Since Wednesday, President Trump has been largely out of sight, muzzled by Twitter and Facebook. His only public appearance, a walk-it-back video scripted by someone else in which he told those same rioters they will pay if they broke the law. So what now? Democrats are preparing to impeach President Trump for a second time. Speaker Nancy Pelosi promising to move forward if Mr. Trump does not resign. There has been talk of removing the president through the 25th Amendment, but there does not appear to be enough support for that. And Mr. Trump is even said to be discussing trying to preemptively pardon himself. Or he could be talked into resignation early in order to receive a more legally sound pardon from a President Pence. Wednesday's madness was what happens when supporters take President Trump both seriously and literally. Still, this was as predictable as it was shocking. In fact, don't take my word for it. Take the word of Senator Marco Rubio, who said this in 2016 about supporting candidate Trump, something he has done since 2016. You mark my words, there will be prominent people in American politics who will spend years explaining to people how they fell into this. Days after he provoked a violent mob to storm the Capitol, a single article of impeachment is expected to be introduced on Monday, accusing President Trump of incitement of insurrection if he does not resign.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
There's a gun! There's a gun! There's a gun!
This video shows the moment rioters reached the door of the Speaker's lobby, leading to the House chambers. Lawmakers hiding in fear, Capitol Police brandishing guns in an armed standoff.
We were just told that there has been tear gas in the rotunda, and we're being instructed to each of us get gas masks that are under our seats.
Dozens have now been charged after Wednesday's rampage, including Richard Barnett of Arkansas, photographed in Speaker Pelosi's office, Lonnie Kaufman of Alabama, whose vehicle allegedly contained 11 Molotov cocktails, a handgun, and an assault rifle, he was carrying 2 more guns. And Jacob Anthony Chansley, a.k.a. Jake Angeli of Arizona, who confronted law enforcement carrying a spear. Protester Ashley Babbitt was fatally shot by a police officer, now on administrative leave. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick also died from injuries after pro-Trump rioters struck him in the head with a fire extinguisher, according to police.
This is an act of domestic terrorism. So this is what the FBI will be focused on 24/7.
The president on Wednesday telling the mob,
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you.
only taping a scripted about face after pressure.
My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
Then reversing course again on Twitter, tweeting his supporters will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly, saying he will not be going to Biden's inauguration. Hours later, Twitter permanently suspended his account due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Now Democrats are pushing to impeach him a second time.
He has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
I think the American people have seen enough.
Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski calling on President Trump to step down. Quote, I want him out. He has caused enough damage.
I will definitely consider whatever articles they might move, because as I've told you, I believe the president has disregarded his oath of office.
But Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is making it clear impeachment proceedings could not start until January 19th in the Senate, a day before Biden is sworn in.
I think it's a ridiculous discussion to have. You don't have the time for it to happen, even if there was a reason.
And joining me now is President Trump's former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, who himself just resigned.
And I actually have a clip of Mick Mulvaney, not from Meet the Press, but from Fox News, if you're following along on the clip list. That is the penultimate clip number 11, before I get to the virus topic. That's one of my criticisms for pretty much all these news summaries did not mention COVID-19. I understand what happened at the Capitol was a huge historical story. You know, the Capitol hasn't been breached since 1814 in the War of 1812, and it was a huge story, but also over 4,000 people died on multiple days. I saw actually on the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, they had breaking news this morning that in the first 9 days of 2021, the U.S. had 2 million new cases. Things are not going well. And so, other than that, I thought that was a great package of pre-recorded video, especially the produced part from the NBC News Meet the Press news summary that Chuck Todd narrates. Oh, I saw someone was asking about Chuck's hoarse voice. At one point he talks about having done too much broadcasting and a lot of what did he say, honey and lemon or honey and something. Anyway, he has a sore throat apparently, and that was, you'll see that in the later clip. This next news summary is from Fox News Sunday, and it's very similar to straight news this week. A lot of Fox News has been bailing on Trump, but just like the more establishment parts of the Republican Party, there's still been, Laura Ingraham still kind of defending him. Even Tucker Carlson said, Trump only thinks about Trump, just like all the politicians. No one is out there thinking about you. And so I don't know. I think that Fox News has been, as I've been showing for weeks, has been pivoting more and more away from Trump. And I think Wednesday was a big part of the break. The Wall Street Journal said he should resign, which the Wall Street Journal is also owned by the same corporation as Fox News. So take that for what you think that means. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday News Summary. Chris Wallace starting off, and then going over to David Spunt at the White House, where, I don't know, no one even knows what's going on with Trump, especially since he can't tweet anymore. How will we even know what's going on in his deranged mind? But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday News Summary together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. This is a week that has shaken the nation's capital to its core. A week that brought a direct assault on our democracy. We saw the President of the United States urge tens of thousands of people not to accept the results of the election, to march on Congress and demand they stop the steal. We saw senators, self-proclaimed adherents to the text of the Constitution, ignore the 155 million Americans who voted and say Congress should decide who the next president is. We saw a mob of insurrectionists storm the Capitol, lay waste to the offices of elected leaders, invade the Senate chamber, and even sit in the chair the vice president occupied moments before. And now this. We saw a non-scalable 7-foot fence go up around the Capitol grounds. For all the talk about the barrier on our southern border, this is the wall many will remember as the true mark of Donald Trump's presidency. This hour, we'll discuss it all. The resignations, the calls to remove the president, and the search to find some way to put the pieces of our government back together. In a moment, we'll speak with former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn. But first, let's turn to David Spunt at the White House with the latest on demands for the president to step down or be forced out. David.
Chris, there is a very real possibility Donald Trump could become the first president in American history to be impeached twice. It just takes the majority of the House to do so, and Democrats are chomping at the bit.
I want to thank you all.
Minutes after President Trump spoke to the crowd, melee inside and outside of the United States Capitol. 5 people, including a Capitol Police officer, died. Trump administration officials continue to submit resignations, including Cabinet Secretaries Elaine Chao and Betsy DeVos. A second impeachment could happen in just days.
We don't need a lengthy debate. The president's abuse of power, his incitement of a mob against the duly elected representative body of the United States is a manifestly impeachable offense.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll move forward with impeachment if Vice President Mike Pence decides against invoking the 25th Amendment and the president refuses to resign. If the House impeaches, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate won't get involved until January 19th at the soonest, the day before Trump leaves office. Some Republicans don't want to wait. I want him to resign. I want him out. He has caused enough damage, Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski told her hometown newspaper. Late Friday, Twitter banned the president's account permanently. A Twitter spokesperson says his tweets incited violence. I'm told Vice President Pence will attend President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration on January 20th. President Trump said he will not, making him the first president to skip an inauguration since Andrew Johnson did so to General Ulysses Grant in 1869. Chris.
David Spunt reporting from the White House. David, thank you. And joining us now, Mick Mulvaney.
And as I promised, I will have that Mick Mulvaney clip, clip 11, if you're following along on the clip list. I'm showing you all 5 of the Big 5 corporate outlet news summaries in order from longest to shortest. That's how we got Meet the Press and then Fox News Sunday, which, like I said, Fox News Sunday almost like fits in as if it were like a real news show, not like what you would learn if you read this book, The Loudest Voice in the Room. It's kind of dark over there. I moved some things around and it's not like there. The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman will tell you how Fox News was created to actually be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. And there's so much Fox News bias these days when it comes to the coverage of Biden. They've found all the standards that they never applied to Trump that they're now going to apply to the Biden administration. And I almost feel like I should stop doing my live streams and start doing Fox News bias videos again. Although Actually, if you wait till the end, I have an announcement that the end of my live stream, my Sunday live clip roundups, it's been put off for about at least 4 months. It's not going to be January 24th anymore. It's going to be sometime in May. Remind me at the end and I'll explain why that is. But I want to get on to the next news summary. I'm going off on a big tangent. This is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where I like some of the context he came up with from before the election, after the election, and where we are now. That, like I said, each of these gets shorter and shorter. This is about a minute shorter than Fox News Sunday, but maybe some more news packed in there. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section while we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Before the first votes were cast, President Trump called it a rigged election, refused to promise a peaceful transfer of power if he lost. And from the moment he lost, Trump lied about the results, encouraging supporters to stop the steal. Those were the chants heard from his mob as they stormed the Capitol on Wednesday. The most serious attack on that citadel of our democracy since the British invasion of 1814. Except this time, the attackers were American citizens, incited by the president. 5 died from the assault, including a police officer defending the Capitol. The American carnage Trump decried in his inaugural address is defining his final days in office, with growing calls for an unprecedented second impeachment. Over 190 members of Congress have now sponsored an impeachment resolution that concludes Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by willfully inciting violence against the government of the United States. And our brand new poll with Ipsos shows a majority of Americans want the president removed from office before his term ends. We cover all the fallout this morning, starting with our team of correspondents. I want to go to Mary Bruce on Capitol Hill. And Mary, no president has been impeached twice. No president has been impeached in his final days. Of course, no president has been credibly accused of inciting an insurrection. So we're in completely uncharted territory here.
George, completely unprecedented. The Hill right now is barreling towards impeachment again. It is one final massive political test of the Trump presidency. So tomorrow, House Democrats plan to introduce an article to impeach the president for inciting violence. Democrats overwhelmingly support this, and we expect some Republicans could back this too. Now, the House Speaker has told her members to be prepared for action, but she has not yet formally backed impeachment proceedings. If she does, though, this could move very quickly, but not quickly enough to actually remove Trump from office early. A Senate trial is not expected to start until after Biden is inaugurated, and Republicans there are likely going to face tremendous pressure from both sides. 17 of them would have to join Democrats to convict. And while we have seen a growing number of Republicans criticizing the president, most are walking a very fine line on the question of culpability. So right now, just a few Senate Republicans have suggested they could possibly back impeachment. Democrats are also in a tough position, though. They want to hold Trump accountable, but they also want to unite and bring the country together. And a Senate trial would dominate the early days of the new administration, just as President Biden is eager to get to work, George.
And that is the concern, and that's why House Speaker Nancy.
And there's some more news coverage. I wanted that Mary Bruce clip because it's about impeachment, what's going to happen in terms of the House. And you'll see when I get to the James Clyburn clip, clip number 7, right after the news summaries, he suggests that Nancy Pelosi could after the impeachment, could then hold the impeachment before she sends it over to the Senate for like 100 days so that Biden could have his first 100 days and then the Senate would deal with the trial for removal, or, Trump would be gone. So the whole point of the impeachment would be whether he would be convicted and whether they could preclude him from holding any further office. That's one of the things that can result from impeachment. And, even if he isn't convicted in the Senate, one reason, they talked about how Trump would be the only president twice impeached, which I think he's definitely worthy of. But the other reason I think it would be great is because I've listened to Trump. I've listened to so many of his speeches, and he's always talking about the impeachment hoax. And what I want to happen is he talks about the impeachment hoax, and that people have to say, wait, which one? Which one? That's what would be great about Trump being twice impeached. But this next news summary, like I said, they're going from longest to shortest, but this, in a lot of ways, is the best one. Jake Tapper is CNN State of the Union. the winner this week for a couple different reasons. You'll hear some light swearing in this clip. The kind of thing that they would bleep out. They didn't bleep out damn, but G-damn they would sometimes bleep out when I was growing up back in the olden days. And then there's this phrase he uses that's kind of a thinker. At first I thought he had misspoken, but then I looked to see if they fixed it during the replay. He talks about Republicans as rats fleeing a sinking rat. At first I thought he said rats fleeing a sinking raft, which, why would there be rats on a raft anyway? And then I thought maybe he meant rats fleeing a sinking ship, but then, no, I think Trump is the rat, and they're rats fleeing a sinking rat. This is definitely the most incisive news summary of them all. Like I said, Jake Tapper wins again this week over in this clip.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is just utterly devastated. After one of the darkest days in our nation's history, a coup attempt, no longer bloodless, instigated by the President of the United States. The flags at the U.S. Capitol are at half-staff this morning for the police officer Brian Sicknick, who was murdered this week. But they are not at half-staff at the White House. Perhaps because Officer Sicknick was the enemy of the terrorist mob. And the mob loves Trump. The mob, by trying to intimidate, threaten, or even kill the vice president and members of Congress who were counting the electoral votes, that mob was in turn loved back by Trump. According to Republican Senator Ben Sasse, White House aides told him that the president was, quote, delighted watching the insurrection. In Trump's view, they were fighting for him. Trump put out a statement. "We love you," he said, after the attack. "You're very special." Now, it might be difficult to hear these words. It's difficult to say them because it's so ugly, but it's true. The flag isn't down at the White House because the president is not mourning Officer Sicknick. He hasn't personally decried the terrorists in any way because the president loves the terrorists. And he reportedly has not even spoken to his own vice president, whose life was at risk since Wednesday. The images of this attack are so shocking that many of Trump's enablers are finally, with just a few days left in his presidency, beginning to get the goddamn point that his continuous lies and humoring of racists and winks and nods to violent extremists are dangerous. Twitter and many other social media outlets have silenced him permanently. Members of his cabinet are bailing like rats from a sinking rat. Some of his closest allies on Capitol Hill are now trying to weasel their way out of their responsibility for the bloodshed, how they shared lies for months. And the case for Trump's second impeachment is expected to be introduced to the House tomorrow. We're going to speak to a Republican senator who says he does think the president committed impeachable offenses. But we're first going to start with the latest from the House of Representatives. And joining us now, Majority Whip Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. Whip.
And like I said, that will be the first newsmaker clip after the clip after next, because next is the final news summary from CBS News Face the Nation. What do you think? Wasn't that the most devastating against Trump of all the news summaries? He took it right to him. How he loves the terrorists. That's why, and the flags not at half-mast at the White House, even though they're at half-mast, because he doesn't want to mourn. I thought he was like the Law and Order, love the cops guy, Donald Trump, but no. And like I said, Jake Tapper, definitely the winner. CBS News Face the Nation has a lot of the same news in it. It's the shortest of the news summaries. And it almost makes me... Whoever wrote this is I think they think they're writing literature or something. I call this news summary the sounds of silence, because there's definitely a silence motif in this news summary. I guess it's only 90 seconds long or so you can do a little poetic motif, as I will talk about with you a little more maybe after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It's a quiet Sunday here in the nation's capital, but the next 10 days promise to be anything but as we get closer to Inauguration Day. One reason it's quiet, The president's Twitter account has been silenced forever. President Trump remains at the White House, and there is apprehension about what he might do next. He has not spoken to Vice President Pence, who is still being given the silent treatment following Mr. Trump's attacks on him for not sabotaging the electoral vote process. That stinging rebuke of his loyal follower has upset even close allies of the president. We are told the president himself has privately acknowledged that Mr. Pence got a bad deal, but he has not publicly condemned those who stormed the Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." High-ranking officials discussed invoking the 25th Amendment, where the president would be removed by a vote from his cabinet. That option still exists, but as of now, no proposal has been submitted to the vice president. The president refuses to resign, and he plans to travel this week to highlight his work at the border. An article of impeachment will be introduced in the House tomorrow, and Speaker Nancy Pelosi has asked Congress to prepare to return to Washington. 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stahl sat down with the Speaker Friday. We begin with a preview from tonight's broadcast.
When I stopped it before the 60 Minutes clip, that's like much more likely to get me a copyright claim from CBS than the Face the Nation clip, which, like I said, that a lot of the same news was in there, but I think if you watched it, my title link, The Sounds of Silence or whatever, that was definitely the motif there. I'm not sure why, but anyway, I want to get to this next clip, which covers two different topics. It's from CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper talking to Representative James Clyburn. He's part of the House leadership, and so he has some insight into what's going to go on with the impeachment vote. And this is where he talks about, he doesn't commit Nancy Pelosi to doing anything, but just thinks that she will strategically send over the articles of impeachment to the Senate when it's best for the Biden administration or whatever. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where they may actually hold on to the articles of impeachment for like 100 days so that Biden could get his first 100 days done, and then the Senate takes it up and decides whether Trump should be convicted and precluded from holding high office in the future, which would be an interesting vote, even though it's not an imminent threat like Trump is for the next 10 days. And so that's the first part of this clip with James Clyburn, but then there's a second part where he talks about this idea that maybe some of the police officers were complicit, or there was somehow an inside job. And there's like some reports that support that theory, although it seems like there needs to be a lot more investigation. There were certainly military people and ex-military people and off-duty police officers amongst the riotous insurrectionists, but whether the Capitol Police actually were complicit, well, you'll hear James Clyburn give like this one fact that made him suspicious, and I'll talk by the end of this CNN State of the Union clip I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Of what the president did.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that any trial of the president after impeachment could begin on January 20th at 1 p.m. That would be about an hour after Biden has been sworn in as the 46th president. It could distract the Senate from considering any cabinet nominees for Joe Biden, passing coronavirus relief. Do you have any concerns that Congress will be distracted if this trial goes forward instead of focusing on the cabinet and coronavirus?
Yes, I do have concerns, but so does Speaker Pelosi. Mitch McConnell is a pretty good legislator, and he's doing what he thinks he needs to do to be disruptive of President Biden. But I will say to Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi is smarter than that. We'll take the vote that we should take in the House, and she will make the determination as when is the best time to get that vote and get the managers appointed and move that legislation over to the Senate. It just so happens that if it didn't go over there for 100 days, it could be. Let's give President-elect Biden the 100 days he needs to get his agenda off and running, and maybe we'll send the articles sometimes after that.
All right, so you might impeach this week, vote to impeach this week, but then not deliver the articles of impeachment for several months until the cabinet, at least most of the cabinet, has been confirmed for Joe Biden, as well as coronavirus relief being passed. Interesting. I want to...
Well, that's what I'm talking now. I'm sort of a manager. This is my first elective office. I've been managing something all of my life. And so I would say in this instance, it's up to the speaker to do whatever she thinks is the best thing to do. But all I'm saying is you can manage this in such a way that you make it an effective presentation to the Senate.
Okay. I want to warn our viewers about some graphic videos from the terrorist attack. We've seen some like this one I'm putting up on the screen now. Capitol police officers being attacked and hurt by these insurrectionists, by these domestic terrorists. One officer, Brian Sicknick, was even killed. We have also seen some images there was an image of a policeman, a Capitol Police, taking a selfie with a rioter. We've seen some other images of officers appearing to allow the protesters, the rioters, to pass by. Now, you suggested on a caucus phone call that there may be some Capitol Police officers who aided the rioters, were complicit in the attack. You said, quote, something else was going on untoward here. Obviously, as you stated at the beginning, so many police officers did such a valiant job and should be commended, and so many of them were injured. One of them obviously was killed. Removing them from the conversation, what evidence are you talking about?
Well, I'm saying that I have an unmarked office that you got to know exactly where it is. It's where I spend most of my time doing my work as the majority whip. I have a staff. We work pretty hard trying to keep up with the members, trying to make sure we do an effective job of managing the votes once they get to the floor. And that office is where I do most of my work. And for some reason, these people showed up at that office. But the office where my name is above the door or on the door, and my position above the door was not disturbed. So I'm just saying, they didn't go to where my name was. They went where I usually hang out. And so that, to me, indicates that something untoward may have been going on.
I want to ask you about a comment Nancy Pelosi made about...
So you saw there that James Clyburn first talked about, like I said, that impeachment could be delayed or after Trump is impeached in the House this week, possibly, it looks like. The House could delay sending it over to the Senate for an opportune time, maybe months later. And then you saw Jake Tapper. Well, first he was very solicitous of the police officers, and some of them were protecting were protecting members of Congress, and like I said, it was a real close thing. And you heard James Clyburn. Well, if you watch his whole interview, he said a lot of nice things about the cops who were protecting him, but he also had this theory about how did they find my unmarked office. And, you know, there is an alternate possibility that there were just so many people spreading all over the Capitol. It's like you pour water into something, and if some droplets get to like some far-flung part of the building, it's not because they knew how to get there. It's just because it was spreading everywhere. And there were thousands and thousands of people in there, I think, at some point. But then I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of, and I don't know if it has anything to do with this weird suicide story I heard about another Capitol police officer who was involved in Wednesday's events, who apparently committed suicide, and maybe we'll learn more about that. But I wanted to juxtapose the first part of that James Clyburn clip with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's talk about impeachment. She also thinks impeachment has to be pursued, the 25th Amendment, which, before I show this clip, I wanted to talk about briefly. And then she also mentions Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which I'll talk about after. Now, I had kind of poo-pooed the 25th Amendment for a long time when Trump was president, because it's actually harder to remove a president under the 25th Amendment than it is to do an impeachment and removal, because to ultimately remove a president for disability under the 25th Amendment requires 2/3 of both houses. But we are in a very special time for the 25th Amendment, because there is a period, if the vice president and the cabinet together, or majority of the cabinet, decide that the president is unable to fulfill his duties, there's like a 21-day period before the two houses have to vote, and if they don't get 2/3, he becomes president again. And we don't need to, if Mike Pence and the cabinet would just decide that Trump was unable to fulfill his duties, he'd be kicked out for 21 days. I mean, he has like 4 days to come back and say, no, I'm not disabled. But then, as long as the vice president and the cabinet stick to it, if you read the 25th Amendment, there's like 21 days there where he's not going to be president. Also, there's the possibility of him resigning, especially so that Mike Pence could pardon him, which is a lot more viable than a self-pardon. But then there's also this Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talks about in this clip that I will talk about with you a little more. And it starts off with, this was almost the political comedy I used, the Republicans who are saying, oh, you can't impeach Trump because it would be too divisive, although the ones in this letter, at least, are the Republicans who were against objecting to the certification of Biden's votes on Wednesday. So they're the less extreme Republicans, but still, here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about that, and then also even saying she doesn't care if she disrupts the Biden administration with impeachment going to the Senate over in this clip.
And, you know, the several Republican members of Congress who opposed raising objections to certifying the Electoral College vote have written a letter to President-elect Biden opposing impeachment. Here's what the letter says. It says, in the spirit of healing and fidelity to our Constitution, we ask that you formally request that Speaker Nancy Pelosi discontinue her efforts to impeach President Donald J. Trump a second time. A second impeachment only days before President Trump will leave office is as unnecessary as it is inflammatory. They're saying, for the sake of unity, forego impeachment.
Well, you know, I think there's a couple of things. One is we have to understand that what happened on Wednesday was insurrection against the United States. That is what Donald J. Trump engaged in, and that is what those who stormed the Capitol engaged in. And so when we talk about healing, the process of healing is separate and, in fact, requires accountability. And so if we allow insurrection against the United States with impunity, with no accountability, we are inviting it to happen again. That is how serious it is. And I do not believe that perhaps my colleagues weren't in that room, perhaps my colleagues were not fully present for the events on Wednesday, but we came close to half of the House nearly dying on Wednesday. And if a foreign head of state, if another head of state came in and ordered an attack on the United States Congress, would we say that that should not be prosecuted? Would we say that there should be absolutely no response to that? No. It is an act of insurrection. It's an act of hostility. And we must have accountability, because without it, it will happen again.
There's a concern also from Democrats, though, that if you're having a Senate trial, it can't happen in the next 10 days. If you're having the Senate trial in the early days of President Biden's term, it's going to prevent the confirmation of his appointees to the cabinet. It's going to slow down, perhaps, the passage of essential COVID relief legislation.
You know, I think, George, I think we need to review what actually happened on Wednesday. The National Guard was requested by the D.C. Council and was rejected. We are talking about, and we are hearing about, a complete and utter lack of preparation. The chief of the D.C. Capitol Police lied to House Administration Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren about the preparations of what happened. We need to know what happened and how deep this goes. And if we do not take corrective action right now, we are talking about those same potentially compromised elements being in charge of the president's security during the inauguration. And so, with profound respect, I believe that the president's safety and the safety of the United States Congress and the security of our country, it takes precedent over the timing of nominations and the timing of potential confirmations. This is in immediate danger right now.
So you're confident House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is going to move forward with impeachment?
I do believe that we will be moving forward with impeachment, but again, we are looking towards multiple avenues, and I do not believe that those avenues are mutually exclusive. This is not an either-or proposition. This is not either the 25th Amendment or impeachment or investigating our other avenues through the 14th Amendment. I do not believe that any of these avenues are competitive with one another. They all frankly provide their own form of relief and their own forms of accountability. And so I do not believe that this is a question of deciding or debating between which of these avenues we should pursue. I believe we should take an all of the above approach.
Congressman, thanks for your time this morning. Let's bring in.
So yeah, you see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's all of the above approach includes Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which if you read it, I have my ACLU Constitution here. By the way, maybe I should stop here for a moment and mention that, I said how I sent out these T-shirts to a lot of my patrons on Patreon. Anyone who wanted one at the time, actually. There's a link down in the video description to become a monthly patron on Patreon. Also, for direct PayPal contributions, there's a link. And at the $5 level, if you support me through Patreon or through PayPal, and give me a shipping address at the $5 level, I send out this weatherproof vinyl #LiberalViewer sticker. And at the $10 level, you get the sticker plus an ACLU Constitution. If you had your ACLU Constitution right now, you could be looking at page 31, which is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that says that no person shall be a senator, representative in Congress, elector, a president, vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or an officer of the United States or a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So this is like after the Civil War, they wanted people who engaged in insurrection to not be able to hold high office, although it didn't actually say president in there. That's one of the things I've been reading I'm subscribed to this con law professor list, and I've been reading some people pointing out that it never says president, and it says president in other places, so it might not even apply to the president, but it actually might require a conviction for insurrection or rebellion, at least according to Laurence Tribe, Harvard professor and author of this very big, heavy book, American Constitutional Law, that I happen to own. I happen to have read, believe it or not. And here's Laurence Tribe explaining why Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is not the best bet over here.
Pelosi will follow.
Let's talk about another amendment that people are talking about, particularly Republicans saying, don't go to the 25th Amendment, don't go for impeachment, but utilize Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which basically says that it bars someone from running again if they engage in insurrection and engage in rebellion against the government. Why do you think that is not a viable option?
Well, it might be afterwards. That is, if the president or anyone else is actually convicted of engaging in insurrection or rebellion, and the evidence might well show that, then that would kick in automatically unless 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate rule that the disqualification should be lifted. But going down that untried path one we haven't used since the Civil War. At this point, would be difficult because the president, although we saw with our own eyes that he was guilty of inciting insurrection, we don't really know how involved he was in the insurrection itself. And we shouldn't get hung up on that when there is a well-trod, clearly available path to remove him, and that is through impeachment.
One other question I need to ask you about, Professor Trump.
And actually, the next question he asked him about was self-pardons. I put a link down in the video description to the MSNBC website for the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart. I don't know if they have the whole Laurence Tribe interview. Later, he actually disagrees with me about whether what Trump did was advocacy or incitement at his rally. You know, I showed you that Brandenburg versus Ohio standard where you can't be guilty of inciting lawless action unless your advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. But the other screenshot I have for you is from 18... Wait, where's my clip list? This is a federal law, 18 U.S. Code Section 2383, which is titled Rebellion and Insurrection. And remember, if you read Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that's the exact phrase that disqualifies you from holding office. And that exact phrase is defined in the U.S. Code here. Whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 10 years. Oh, and then you see the part I've highlighted here, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. And that goes back to like 1948 and then 1994. But this seems to be like the statute that Congress enacted to sort of enact Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And, but as you saw Laurence Tribe say there, the whole thing is kind of murky. There's no case law on it past like the late 19th century. So who knows how that would work or if it would work. Impeachment, removal, or 25th Amendment, or resignation. Maybe the threat of impeachment or the threat of 25th Amendment would lead to resignation. Although you saw in all the news summaries that Mike Pence and the president aren't even talking. But anyway, I have 2 more newsmaker clips, and these two are, I guess they fall under Jake Tapper's category of the rats fleeing the sinking rat. These are 2 Republicans who are distancing themselves from Trump now after supporting him in 2016 and 2020. And I find a lot of this too little, too late, and they both use Pat Toomey is a Republican senator from Pennsylvania, and then Mick Mulvaney was Trump's chief of staff, and then he quit and became the special envoy to Ireland, or I can't even remember exactly what his job, that he actually quit after Wednesday. And they both say that Trump changed after the election. He's like totally changed and spiraled down into someone he never was before, which I find totally ridiculous. And both of them get cross-examined on it. First, Chuck Todd cross-examining Pat Toomey, and then Chris Wallace cross-examining Mick Mulvaney, the rats fleeing the sinking rat. And here's Chuck Todd doing a pretty good cross-examination job. It's well prepared with many clips. I think I said that last week, that he's always well prepared. He may be one of the more produced anchors, maybe not so much at, not as good so much at responding to what someone says in the live moment, but I don't even think that necessarily applies to this one of 2 rats fleeing the sinking rat clips over here.
My 2 points.
Throughout his term, Senator, you were on here quite a few times when uncomfortably he would say something or do something where I would ask you about his rhetoric, and you had a consistent answer. And I want to show some folks those answers. Here we go.
I don't spend a lot of time trying to evaluate and analyze why the president comes to the conclusions he comes to. I don't spend a lot of time focusing on the president's tweets and things that the president says. What I focus more on is what is he going to actually do. I think it's a long way to attributing any kind of real link between what the president might say or tweet and the extraordinary type of madness that leads someone to massacre people.
Now, look, in fairness, I also want to play what you said on the Senate floor this week. Here's that.
We witnessed today the damage that can result when men in power and responsibility refuse to acknowledge the truth. We saw bloodshed because the demagogue chose to spread falsehoods and sow distrust of his own fellow Americans.
Senator, you know the question that's coming, and I'm sure you've heard it from a lot of people. Do you regret not speaking out sooner? And did you underestimate the threat of his rhetoric?
Chuck, I think it's important to make a distinction between the president's behavior prior to the election and his behavior after the election. For years, and said ridiculous things. He lied frequently, many objectionable things. If they were sufficiently objectionable, I did publicly weigh in, and I did many, many times. But he tweeted hundreds of times a day, many days, and I still don't think that I should have gone back and attempted to be his Twitter editor. After the election, he took this to an entire different place, orders of magnitude different. Look, I mean, come on. Recruiting thousands of Americans from around the country to descend on the Capitol, promising a wild ride and inciting them to attack the Capitol building so as to prevent the constitutional responsibility of the Vice President and the Congress to complete the peaceful transfer of power after an election, also that he could try to stay in office. That is wildly beyond anything that any of us, certainly that I ever contemplated, and anything that he did before. I don't think that this unbelievable behavior of Wednesday, for instance, could have been reasonably expected.
Well, you say that, and with all due respect, an entire primary campaign was waged against him in 2016, where some of the very people that support this president still, like Ted Cruz, called him a pathological liar, worried that his rhetoric was going to go in another, and many people didn't believe it. You yourself explained to me, you didn't really believe this was going to go there, and I guess a lot of other folks go, why? How did you miss it?
Well, you know, how did half of America miss it, or more than half America? I'm quite sure that many Democrats that voted for Joe Biden didn't expect that this was going to happen, Chuck. And it's because the president spiraled down into a kind of madness that was different. I'm sorry if people don't acknowledge that. I think what he did this past week is wildly different from the offensive tweets that were common during his presidency. And I don't think that those tweets clearly indicated that this was coming.
What kind of responsibility do you hold Senators Hawley and Cruz?
And then he asked him about Senator Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, and he basically says, oh, the voters will hold them accountable. But I did not really buy that. Man, he changed. He changed after, like, he used to be such a good guy, Trump, like, you know, Muslim ban, rapists, you know, they're not sending us their best, they're sending us rapists and murderers. I mean, have you been watching my Sunday Live clip roundup for the last 4 years at Charlottesville, Helsinki, the Mueller report, where Russia collusion, they're actually, Trump didn't engage in the Russia collusion that could be criminally prosecuted for reasons I've discussed ad nauseum before, but through Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, there was definitely, especially through Roger Stone, there was a coordination of the WikiLeaks distribution of the Russian hacked materials, and of course in the Mueller report there was all that obstruction of justice, And then, of course, Michael Cohen went to prison for a crime of campaign finance crime he was directed to commit by Donald Trump, with the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. That's waiting for him in the Southern District of New York, and he can't self-pardon his way out of that one. So he has engaged. I mean, for Pat Toomey to say that, oh, he changed in the election and now he's so much worse than we ever imagined, and who could have thought? I mean, I think I've lost subscribers for how adamant I've been about how Trump is a huge threat to our democracy, and I don't even know what's going to happen in the next 10 days. I saw in the comment section earlier people talking about this January 17th thing, which is next Sunday. My next show is supposed to be when there's supposed to be rebellions in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals all across the country. The Proud Boys have been showing up. I live in a state capital here in Sacramento. The Proud Boys have been showing up like every Saturday for the last like 4 or 5 weeks, and they also had something going on Wednesday. And so, I mean, I don't think this thing that happened Wednesday was the end of that we're going to see of that kind of thing. We saw the thing in Michigan. We've seen attacks on other state houses. Here in my county, Sacramento County, when they were talking about putting COVID restrictions on businesses, a whole bunch of like right-wing pro-business people went down to the County Board of Supervisors meeting, which was closed to the public because of COVID. You could only like phone in, and they were like pounding on the doors, and they had to like close down the meeting for like an hour and then restart it. I should have gotten that clip for you all, but this isn't really about 2020. Here's where I'm giving my big opinion. It's really about 2040. What's going on in 2040? Well, that's the year, the predicted year. It's going to be right around then when white people are actually going to be a minority in the United States. And there are some people that scares. That's, you know, and that's what this turn against democracy, because democracy is the will of the majority, and there was a lot of white supremacy, there was a lot of neo-Nazism, Proud Boys. It's going to get worse before it gets better. That's my prediction, and I'm not happy to say it. And the one good thing that's happened this week, I think, is from the rats fleeing the sinking rat, is the establishment of the Republican Party. Some of the people who I'm not talking about who voted for Trump, who aren't like white supremacists, they just were willing to hold their nose and vote for one. They're leaving Trump this week. He's lost the establishment. He's lost like some of those a lot of suburban people, you know, suburban women have left the Republican Party, and he's basically splitting the Republican Party, or at least that's the only good news out of this week. And he's even lost Mick Mulvaney, who is even worse of a rat fleeing the sinking rat. In the final clip on my Impeach Trump again topic, see my Impeach Trump topic, here's Mick Mulvaney. I kind of edited this from Chris Wallace's first question, and then he talks about whether Trump should be removed, and I don't care what Mick Mulvaney thinks about that. And then at the end, and then he talks about how the last impeachment was bogus, which also not true. I cut that part out. But then talks about Charlottesville and talks about the kids in cages, tries to say, oh, that's Obama. And I'll talk about all that after we watch this pretty good cross-examination from Chris Wallace, doing a good job as a journalist, which sometimes happens on Fox News over here.
Mick Mulvaney, President Trump's former chief of staff, who resigned this week as the administration's special envoy to Northern Ireland. Mick, after all of the controversial things that Donald Trump did over the last 4 years, why was this week the final straw? Why now say that you could no longer be part of his administration?
Chris, good morning. Thanks for having me. I think everybody recognizes that what happened on Wednesday is different. You could go down the long litany of things that people complained about with Donald Trump, and I could probably defend almost all of them. Many of them were policy differences. Many of them were stylistic differences. But Wednesday was different. Wednesday was existential. Wednesday is one of those things that struck to the very heart of what it means to be an American, and it was wrong. And I think it was important for those of us who used to be on the inner circle. I mean, look, you and I have been doing this for years. I came in 2010 in the Tea Party. I started the Freedom Caucus with Mark Meadows. I was in the cabinet. I was the chief of staff. I thought it was important for somebody who's not establishment, who's not a never Trumper, to come out and say that was wrong. It needs to be said again and again and again by as many people as possible.
Should President Trump be removed? Some other things. You were a top member of the administration when the president defended the white supremacists at Charlottesville. You were a top member of the administration, not chief of staff, when the Trump administration separated parents coming across the border from their children. Why not resign over those?
I remember the kids in cages thing, which a lot of folks gave a lot of attention to, and we've seemed to have forgotten, including you, Chris, that those pictures, many of the pictures of the kids in cages were taken during the Obama administration. They were Obama cages.
Nothing like with the policy under Donald Trump.
Chris, these are policy differences, okay? These are things that you think the country should look one way, we think it should look another. These are differences of style, the way the president speaks. Did he misspeak at Charlottesville? Yes. Should he have corrected it? Yes. Did he handle it poorly? Yes. But it was not something that people resign over. If you talk for a living, as you and I do, you're going to misspeak from time to time. It's inevitable. Those are not the type of things that give rise to resignations. In fact, I don't think anybody, including John Kelly, resigned during any of those things. As I recall, John Kelly got fired and didn't resign. Wednesday was different, and I hope that we focus on why Wednesday was different than something about a policy over immigration or a policy on how to handle this or that. This is different, and I think it's important that people recognize the differentiations between differences over policy and what happened on Wednesday.
Finally, on November 7th, you pointed this out, and I want to ask you specifically about it. On November 7th, 4 days after the election, as you point out, you wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal. I want to put some of it up. You said, the U.S. needs to know that the winner is actually the winner. And once Americans know that, I have every expectation that Mr. Trump will be, act, and speak like a great president should, win or lose. Mick, how could someone who worked with the president so closely for 3 years be so wrong about who Donald Trump was?
Yeah, clearly something is different now than it was when he saw it. I wrote that article for a reason, because I had seen the examples. And if you go read the piece, I give a couple of examples. I've never told this one. There's another example that I've never talked about publicly, which is that during the impeachment, the president tweeted something during the testimony, and there was concern that it might rise to the level of tampering with witnesses. I know a little bit about the law. I practiced law a long time ago. It wasn't that, but I was worried about the political impact of that. So I went to the president, privately said, Mr. President, this is going to be a political problem. We need to fix this. He looked at me and said, okay, brought the lawyers down, talked to them, picked up the phone, called Kevin McCarthy, brought Ivanka in, talked to them, talked to some of his friends in New York, got a bunch of different opinions, and then fixed it, reversed course, and did the right thing. That was the president that we saw time and again. You saw him through the media. You saw him in the light that you wanted to see him. We saw the real President Trump, who had that ability to pivot when he knew something had gone off the rails. That didn't happen on Wednesday. It hasn't happened much since the election. And that's what I think the difference is, and that's why I got that piece so wrong 6 weeks ago.
Mick, thank you.
Thank you, Mick, for... no, I don't know. I don't think that thank you was justified. I do appreciate Chris Wallace pulling out that crazy article that Mick Mulvaney wrote about how Trump was going to concede gracefully. And how could you have been so wrong? And I don't buy his answer. I think Chris Wallace could have pushed back a little harder on the kids in cages thing. He did say when Mick Mulvaney pulled out that thing. You know, some news outlets did talk about the cages with kids in them that were from the Obama administration, and I actually was someone who protested against the Obama administration's immigration policy. I have YouTube videos proving it. He was like, Obama was the deporter in chief, and so there were pictures of that, but it was Trump that had this systematic policy of separating children from their parents, thousands and thousands of them, with no plan to ever put them back together. If you want to know more about that, there's a book right here by Jacob Soboroff called Separated, and it's an incredibly sad story. And so Chris Wallace could have mentioned the thousands and thousands of children. All he said was, well, nothing like what Trump did, which is true, but not enough. And then it was pretty chilling to see Mick Mulvaney say, oh, that's just a policy difference, like kidnapping thousands of children from their parents. And I've seen Jacob Soboroff talk about how the American Academy of Pediatrics have said that that's actually torture for months and even years, taking children away from their parents. That has huge developmental impacts. And anyway, but at least kudos to Chris Wallace for bringing it up. It's something, another one of the, how many low points I'm so glad there are only 10 days left of Trump. And anyway, you can let me know what you think about the, Betsy DeVos and Elaine Chao, who is Senate Majority Leader, soon to be Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's wife, was in the Trump administration. Wasn't she Secretary of Transportation, if I'm... anyway, she resigned after the January 6th insurrection. But like I said, Jake Tapper's rat's fleeing the sinking rat, I guess. And I want to end with the one story that was undercovered on most of the news shows, but I've said this many times, I'll say it one more time. This is the second topic of vaccine distribution and possible mutation problems. CBS News Face the Nation, like a year ago, in January and February of 2020, was the only one of the news shows who really covered the unknown virus in China story that we all learned much more about. And at the time, I didn't even take those clips. I've said this so many times that I said either they were the one network that was overhyping the story, or they were the one network covering the most important story of the year. And turned out it was number 2. And this is my topic number 2, where Margaret, Brennan, and CBS, which maybe it should be the COVID broadcasting system, talks to Mark Gottlieb, who was FDA commissioner earlier in the Trump administration, talking both about the vaccine distribution problems. And then you thought that last topic was dark. Wait till you get to the end of this Scott Gottlieb clip, where Scott Gottlieb talks about how the UK mutation, which is more contagious, is not quite as bad possibly than this South African variant, for reasons I will talk about with you after we watch that final news clip in my second topic, the one news clip, the one news program. Actually, Jonathan Capehart covered it really well in the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart, but of the big 5 shows I usually show, only CBS News' Face the Nation covered COVID, and it's not good news over here.
In addition to the political turmoil in these final days of the Trump administration, vaccine distribution remains problematic. The CDC reports nearly 7 million first doses of the vaccine have been received. That's only 30% of the total distributed across the country. Meanwhile, infections continue to soar. Thursday was the deadliest day yet. Almost 4,200 people died from COVID-19. There have now been over 22 million cases, and more than 372,000 are dead. We want to go now to former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He sits on the board of Pfizer and Illumina, a company that is working on sequencing some of the new virus variants. He joins us from Westport, Connecticut this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
There are more people in this country hospitalized with COVID now than during the spring and summer combined. How much are these new strains from the UK, from South Africa, contributing to this surge?
Probably not a lot right now. We don't know for sure because we're not doing sequencing at a big enough scale like the UK is to really detect these variants. We're looking for the UK variant right now. But the method that we're using to try to detect the UK variant wouldn't necessarily spot the South African variant. So right now we think the prevalence of the UK variant is about 0.2 to maybe 0.3% of infections, and that's based on data that Illumina has helped develop. With the South Africa variant, we don't think it's very prevalent here in the United States, but we could be missing more of those infections. So we don't think that these new variants right now are contributing to the surge of infection that we're seeing. We think this is a post-holiday bounce. But the bottom line is that we need a better system for detecting these things so we can have an adequate public health response.
And how resistant are they to current treatments?
Well, they appear more fit, meaning that they spread more easily, both of these variants. We've done some initial analysis with the UK variant, particularly with respect to the vaccines and the monoclonal antibodies, and the medical products that we have right now do appear to be effective against that UK variant. There's more concern around the South African variant because that variant has mutated the spike protein, the protein that's the target for our vaccines and our antibodies, in a way that could defeat at least the antibodies and perhaps make the vaccines less effective. We're going to have data on the vaccines in the next couple of weeks. Pfizer, the company I'm on the board of, is working on developing some of that data, so we'll have a better answer on that question. But it just goes to show you that these viruses are going to evolve. I mean, this virus has been running through the world, around the world, racing around the world, largely unchecked. It's been under some selective pressure with the widespread use, for example, of convalescent plasma. So it's inevitable that we're going to see these kinds of mutations in this virus. And this is probably going to be a constant struggle. We're going to have to update our vaccines and our antibody drugs and other therapeutics regularly to keep up with these new variants as they emerge.
So you hear that? We're going to have to keep updating our vaccines. That means this vaccine that who knows? President-elect Joe Biden says he wants to inoculate 100 million Americans in his first 100 days. Well, that means to inoculate 300 million Americans is going to take almost a year, 300 days, right? And then to think if there's a mutation, we're going to have to start all over again. You've seen the pictures of the coronavirus, and it's, the ball with all the spikes coming out. Well, those spikes, that's what the vaccines are what they target. That's these, especially the messenger RNA vaccines that have been so quick. They send a message using messenger RNA to your cells, telling your cells to produce the proteins that are in those spikes, and then your own body produces antibodies against the proteins that your body created. And so if the spike proteins change, they don't work anymore. It depends on how much they change, but that is, really bad news for those of us who are hoping that sometime in the spring or the summer, or 100 days, 300 days, that however many days it takes to get up to 70% or 80% of the population being immune, that then life might go back to normal. But I don't know which of the... Someone was asking in the live comments, why do I keep talking about COVID-19 as the second story? Well, if you look down in the video description, I have 2 topics listed. What are my 2 topics? I think I mentioned them at the beginning. Topic 1 was impeach Trump again. That's topic 1. Topic 2, vaccine distribution and possible mutation problems. And I think I've explained why that was the second topic and how that clip supports that topic. So anyway, that was the final news clip. I do have a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip, but I also promised earlier that I was going to explain why I'm no longer ending my Sunday live clip roundups on January 24th, as I had kind of been planning to do. That was the last Sunday after the inauguration. I was kind of hoping to move to a Monday show that would, so I wouldn't have to work during like family time on the weekends. I'd be doing more of my work during like the regular work week. But the thing is, my daughter's coming back to do some remote learning in college this semester, and she's got like 4 hours of classes on Mondays, mostly in the afternoon, and I was thinking doing it like noon or 2 or 3, but there's like, I don't want to compete with my daughter's Zoom classes, so, and since the pandemic's going on, I'm not going to want to go anywhere on Sundays, which was one of the things that keeping... I've done this show for 403 Sundays, more than 7 years, every Sunday, and it kind of ties me down to the house on Sundays. But anyway, I'm kind of tied down to the house for the next few months anyway. So I'm going to wait till the end of the semester when I don't have to compete against those Zoom classes. So I'm going to extend for like at least 4 more months. That will let me cover what happens in the beginning of the Biden administration, which should be kind of interesting anyway. So I will recalibrate maybe to moving my Sunday live clip roundup to Mondays sometime in May, when I don't have to compete against those Zoom classes. And then finally, I did promise a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip, which I have to import here quickly. This is from dinner time tonight. I sort of did a long hallway walk, and you see Sandy, this is going to Sandy's bowl to feed Sandy the dog, and I've taken to giving Dash 1 piece of dog food. I don't know why Dash the cat likes dog food. It's not sardines. I've seen a lot of sardine talk. We'll deal with the whole sardine situation. We've got months now to deal with the sardine situation, right? Since we're going till May. But how is it that Dash the cat gets ahead of Sandy the dog in this clip? That's what I want to know. But anyway, that's the final clip, the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip, before I go tonight over here. So there you go, as promised. Dash and Sandy walking to the dog food bowl, where for some reason Dash the cat got there first, and then Dash eats the dog food. What, dogs and cats living together, wasn't that one of the signs of the apocalypse in Ghostbusters 2 or whatever? But anyway, I show you that sign of the apocalypse every week, I guess, in my Dash and Sandy or Dandy clips. And before I sign off, I do want to thank all of the live stream viewers who gave me the comments along the way that I thought about when I had a chance to read them, and especially the Super Chat contributors. I thank some of you to begin with before the show, Darian Meza and Peter Reed. And then I saw during the show, Matthew, Nelson 100, Lulu Girl gave a couple about Sardine Week and thanking me for increasing or postponing the end of the show. Tom Trask talking about all the trolls. Yeah, I had like 300, 400 viewers. I guess there were a lot of extra trolls this week. And then Iman Gilbert at the end with the New Zealand dollars. I don't even know how much those are worth, but thank you for the compliments. And I am honored to have viewers all over the world, actually. And I will keep doing the show through May, every Sunday. And there are a couple other things I've been thinking of doing. Edited, produced video about this idea I have for filibuster reform before the Democrats take control of the Senate. That was something else I barely got to cover. The Democrats took over the Senate this week, and it got totally overshadowed. I didn't even cover that at all, so I apologize for that. But thanks for all of you who hang on all the way to the end. And I think I had this idea where the filibuster is reformed so that each senator gets to vote the number of reps their state has in the House of Representatives. So that means there would be like 870 votes because there are 435. And anyway, I'll go into that at a later time. I'm like this show is too long already, isn't it? It's time for him to be going. If I do that idea, I've talked about it a little bit, I'll do it in the future. But anyway, until next Sunday and every Sunday for like more months now, until next Sunday and every Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.